Something I want to bring up that I've never said publicly before, but I think is really important when it comes to sex, money, and power, because I agree with you that unlocking your sexuality is a huge key to your personal power. In fact, it is the key to your personal power and the key to your spiritual power as well. And I don't mean just like wearing all white and singing mantras. I mean like knowing yourself as God.
Yes.
Right? If you're afraid of your own pussy and having an orgasm, like I'm going to go ahead and say that you don't know God in every cell of your being, because how could you if God doesn't exist in such a core essential part of you? Now you might know God in your orgasm and your pussy and decide to be celibate, and that would be totally fine. But if we're still in so much shame around our bodies and so sure that like God doesn't exist in the greatest bliss and the greatest union and the greatest pleasure, then there's still something missing from a comprehensive spiritual realization. And so being in a full embodiment and a full knowing of how magical and what a blessing our sexuality is not just a key to knowing God in every dimension, but it actually unlocks our life force energy. And our life force energy is the key to our power. It's also the key to money in certain ways. Now, what always threw me through a loop, and I know throws a lot of women through a loop, is we tend to think of sexually expressed still through the patriarchal model, right? So when I think of who is sexually expressed, right, and I'm just going to talk frankly here, even though it's still got a patriarchal shame-based conditioning in it, I think hooker and slut, right? Like, okay. And then I think, are they financially empowered? Like maybe, but like not really, right? And let's say when I say hooker, what I'm going to talk about, I think there should be two different words, because there's the privileged woman who's like, I want to fuck strangers for money, and it's hot and it's empowering and it's what I choose to do, right? There should be a different word for that, because the vast majority of people in the sexual services and in prostitution are not there in an empowered way, right? They're actually, and especially back in the day, right? They're forced into that profession. It's against their will. Especially back in the day for women, there was no other profession available to them if they weren't married, right? And so when we look at that, they weren't sexually empowered, right? And there is also a version of slut. And again, we need two different words, right? So I would consider myself an empowered slut, which means that I do what I want because it feels good, right? I do what I want because I want it. I am not just playing other people's game of how to sexually express myself, right? I'm playing my game. And that comes from honoring my body, knowing that my body is a temple, and also knowing that sex is a super crucial expression in my being in this lifetime, right? So I'm slutty in the sense that I will share my sexual energy when and how I want to, and not by anybody else's moral code. But a lot of what we would say is slutty expression in our culture is built on unworthiness, right? So I'm going to use my sluttiness as an exchange of what I think is value. So I want to be valued, or I want to be loved, or I want to be chosen. So I'm going to trade my sexuality for value, worth, or being chosen, right? And I would say in the lower form of being a prostitution, so not like the elevated sex work, but the like I'm pushed into it. Mm-hmm. I have to exchange my sexuality for money. So in both of those cases, I'm not actually expressing my sexuality as a deep expression of freedom, as a deep expression of pleasure, as a deep expression of my own sovereign eros. I'm doing it because I have to give it for something that I think I need, right? So this is a disempowered exchange. That's not sexual liberation. The women I know who truly claim my orgasm, my body, my power, and my eros, and I do it on my own terms, and I do it because I feel like it, and I do it outside of old religious morals and what everyone else thinks. This kind of expression of sexuality is what I find is the key to life force, the key to feeling safe in your power, and then the key to making money. And I know so many women who have crossed that bridge and become financially empowered. And this is a big secret key in this as well, because when women decide to become sex witches, when they decide to become high priestesses, right, we still often have a lot of ego in the way. So even when I first started learning sexuality, there was a part of me that desperately wanted to hook male attention. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to hook male attention because I felt unworthy, right? I didn't grow up with fathers who like cherished and adored me. I grew up abandoned. My stepdad loved me, but also created distance with me to keep me safe because he grew up in an abusive relationship with his stepfather. So I knew distance with my caretakers, and I desperately wanted to know that I was lovable. I desperately wanted to feel chosen. So I was like, aha, if I do this fun orgasmic Kundalini thing, I'll finally be chosen, right? But that wasn't my deep empowerment. My deep empowerment came later, where I actually realized my own worth, my own lovability, my own worthiness of being chosen with or without a man showing that to me, mirroring that to me. That's when my full sexual power started to lock in. I became audacious. I became expressive. I became outrageous because that was true to me. And that became a key point to me making money, to me doing what I love. And so when we say, your sexual power is tied into your personal power and your sexual power, it's worth unpacking that so we can really understand how and why and what the true path is to finding power.
Okay. May I respond?
Yes.
There wasn't a question, but I have a lot to say.
I mean, it's more of a discussion. I'm like so proud of my brain right now. I'm usually like, I will explain this before I say this. I spent 13 years sober on my spiritual path. I also am very, I'm like a very responsible partier. Like I love to have a good time, but I'm very responsible. And I was telling you right before this started, I was like, this Burning Man, I was having a rough time. And I was like, look, usually when I have a rough time, like I meditate, I talk to my therapist, I do conscious grieving practices. I have my high priest sex, which friends hold me through my heartbreak. This time I was like, I'm gonna go fucking bender. So like I could literally feel that my brain is like low battery. Like it has like a little beeping signal like way in the back. And like, the other neurons are trying to like fire things up. And they're like, we have like less neurons than usual. So every single time I finish a coherent English sentence,
like you're bringing it back.
I'm like, yeah.
So good. I mean, the great news is like those neural pathways are super well laid down. Like you've got your brain. That's like gonna be your easy button. Winning, totally winning. Okay, so all of that you said, so much of it is ultimately connected to the lie of lack and the lie of separation. Mm-hmm. So those two things are the one and the same, which is the erroneous idea that there's actually not enough to go around. The data shows us there is. There's enough resources on the planet for everybody to live a really good life.
Yes,
that is just true. And then the other one is that we are separate from each other and we are separate from God. So ultimately, if we are acting in a disempowered way, sometimes obviously sexually for women, they've been forced into that. So I'm not saying that's like a choice, and sometimes same thing with money. Like the fundamental, the person who forced us into that or ourselves is acting from the lie of separation and the lie of lack, which is that we are not God. And so ultimately, when we connect in with our eros, we are connecting in with our divinity. When we connect in with our deepest creativity, which is the same energy as abundance, we are connecting in with our divinity. And anytime we are in, because you were using the word slut in, like you were saying, we need a different word for it when you're acting as a sovereign, empowered woman. I totally agree. When we're acting in the other one,
which I've totally been there. I've been like, love me, I'll give you a blowjob, please.
Right? Then it's like, because we are seeking source everywhere else.
Yes.
Source with a capital S.
Yes.
And we do the same thing with money, where we think, okay, I will feel safe when, I will finally feel worthy when, I will finally feel secure when, I will finally feel free when. And we have this same energy of, what I am seeking is out there. And then we turn money into source with a capital S, instead of knowing the truth, which is that the source is inside. The source is divinity. And divinity can be found through our orgasm, through snuggling with a baby, through, like petting a dog. And the source is that feeling of bliss and that feeling of connection, which is ultimately also, I think the whole reason that it's, second chakra is because that is our origin. That is where we come from. We come through, every person on earth has come through a uterus. And so like that whole area of the body is where we come through as humans. So obviously it's the closest door to source. It's all just right there.